Hi everybody. In discussion board number 2 for this week, you're asked to explain an example of an act that you believe is not psychologically egoistic. So egoism is the idea, well, there are different forms of egoism, but psychological egoism is the idea that whatever act you do, if you think that you're doing it for a good reason or for a reason outside of your own benefit, you're wrong. So if you think that there are acts that are not egoistic, then really you're just misinterpreting your motivations for your action. Now there's a form of egoism called ethical egoism that says that the right act is the one that promotes your own self-interest or the interests of those that you care about, in the sense that it's helping you out as well. Now that's different from psychological egoism. Psychological egoism is just a theory that claims that psychologically, like in your thought process, whether you know it or not, the reason why you do good acts is not because out of duty, it's not out of merely the benefit of the other. It's not supererogatory, which means acts that extend beyond what we would consider to be those that you must do. So for example, if somebody gives $1 billion to charity, we would consider that supererogatory, an act that goes beyond the call of duty in relation to moral acts. So those acts don't exist for the psychological egoist. The psychological egoist says things like, the reason why, most people come up with the example, well, a mother's love is not egoistic. So let's reinterpret the example of a mother's love is not egoistic. Well, first of all, mothers wouldn't even be mothers if they didn't have children. And the reason why women have children is because of their own self-interest. Now again here, I don't necessarily believe this, I'm just acting as an egoist. So women and men, couples decide, or women alone who are artificially inseminated or something like that, they decide that they want a child not because they want to bring someone into the world and give them a good life or something like that. It's merely because they want a child. So that's an egoistic act. Technically, there's no reason for anyone to have children. The world is overpopulated as it is. There are plenty of children who are born who need good parents or who need parents that care about them in the foster care system and in adoption, in extremely abusive situations. So the ultimately ethically good act would be not having your own child and just adding to the burden on the earth. It would be to take care of somebody else's child that they don't want, and to do so in a manner that's loving and supportive. So first of all, just having a child is egoistic. You're just doing what you want to do. Now, of course, there are examples where people don't want to have the kid, but they have it anyway. Well, let's take that as an example. So let's say I get pregnant and I believe that I'm doing the right thing. I'm kind of acting in according to duty or some higher moral principle, for example, by having the baby instead of aborting it. Well, let's reinterpret that through the lens of psychological egoism. The psychological egoist could say, well, the only reason why you're having the baby is not because you believe in some higher metaphysical ethical principle. It's that you would just feel really bad if you had an abortion. So the psychological trauma and the physical trauma on your own body from undergoing the abortion, that's really the reason why you're not having the abortion. Or perhaps you believe that a fetus is alive and that you would be killing a person. So you would become a murderer if you believed that and you had an abortion. And so the pain of becoming a murderer psychologically far outweighs the physical pain of actually having the baby. And so it's not the case that you're acting according to some duty or religious or ethical principle. It's merely that it's in your own self-interest to have the baby. Okay, so you're probably getting an idea of how psychological egoism works. It reinterprets all these things through the lens of conscious and subconscious because most people think in their minds, well, I'm doing a really good act here I'm just being a very good human being. But again, the psychological egoist would say, well, psychologically you might think that, but really subconsciously what you're acting out on is your own self-interest. Ethical egoism is a bit different. It says that people ought to act out in their own self-interest, and Ayn Rand was a big proponent of that, and she gets a lot of flack. But what that theory says is that this is kind of like the strong business libertarian, or maybe not libertarian, but the capitalistic idea, right? When I act out in my own self-interest, everyone benefits. So when I make $1 billion or create a business that makes billions and billions of dollars, I'm acting in my own self-interest. I want to be rich, I want power, I want to create this big entity. But when I do that, it's good in the sense that it provides job opportunities for a lot of people. So the trickle effect, right? So when I act out in my own self-interest, it benefits humanity at large. And so I ought to always be acting in my own self-interest. Now, of course, that requires you to be a virtuous human. So this is where Aristotle would come in. If you're not a virtuous human and you're acting in your own self-interest, you can create even more harm than somebody who isn't virtuous but is attempting to act out on something that they don't feel inside themselves. So, for example, Kim Jong-il, I think we can agree, is not a virtuous human, well, from a specific moral perspective. And because of his power and his ability to control things, he caused suffering, starvation, death of a lot of people in North Korea. So him acting out in his own self-interest, I'm going to build this huge palace with gold statues, and I'm going to spend thousands of dollars on whiskey and take all the money from my people and just allow them to suffer the consequences. That obviously, acting in his own self-interest isn't good for humanity. The ultimate leader would be one who would probably give up her own pleasure and her own riches for the people. So when his or her people are starving to death, the good leader would be the one who would sell gold or oil or something that can bring in a lot of profit, and then redistribute that income to the people to ensure that the citizens of that country don't starve to death and that they can flourish on their own. So that's where ethical egoism as a theory runs into problems. But in this case, we're just talking about psychological egoism. And I'll end with this final example. In a textbook that I used to teach from, there was an example of Abraham Lincoln in a stagecoach driving around with a friend, and they're having a conversation about this. And according to the story, Abraham Lincoln kind of felt this way. He said to his friend, everything that humans do is based in their own self-interest, including myself. We can't say that anybody can do things from kind of a pure conscience. There's always some good that they're trying to maximize in their own life. And as they're driving, they hear a pig, a razorback sow, so like a wild pig, and it's screaming, right? I don't know if you guys have ever heard pigs scream, but it's not a very appealing or soothing sound. Just watch Lord of the Flies. When they kill the pig, slit its throat, spill its blood. Yeah. Or there are plenty of YouTube videos where people go pig hunting, wild pig hunting, and you'll see them kill usually the dogs chase the pigs down and kind of bite them and hold them until somebody comes up and kills the pig. If you watch those videos, they're extremely disturbing precisely because of not only they're killing these pigs, but the sound that the pigs make when they're being chased by the dogs, and you know. But anyway, you should listen to that sound. Anyway, there's this sow, this female pig, it's like screaming, and so they stop the stagecoach. And Abraham Lincoln's like, what's going on? So they look outside, and a bunch of little piglets are stuck in the mud by this river. And the mother is screaming because, you know, she's upset. She wants her little piglets to be okay. And so Abraham Lincoln, as the story goes, he runs down the little embankment and he picks up the little piglets and puts them on the land, and then they can follow mom, and the pig stops screaming. Hops back in the stagecoach. Again, they take off. They start riding. And his friend says to him, look, Abraham, because they're on isn't that funny? We always call him Lincoln, right? Abraham, look, Abe, you just got all dirty and you let all the pigs go, or you picked up the little pigs. That shows that you didn't do that out of your own self-interest. I mean, what are you gaining by getting mud all over your shoes and your pants and everything? And supposedly Abraham Lincoln said, no, it's totally in my self-interest. He's like, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself the rest of the day had we just kept going. I would keep thinking about that screaming mother pig and how her babies were stuck in the mud and how I could have done something differently. And so there Abraham Lincoln thinks that he's proven that, or according to the story, it could be totally false. But anyway, he thinks he's shown that even that act, releasing the little piglets, was a psychologically egoistic act. But the problem with saying that, and his friend comes back at him, his friend can say, but Abraham, if you did everything that was in your own self-interest, then why would you be worried about the pigs in the first place? What is it that made you initially feel badly enough for the pigs that you then went and helped them? There has to be some other fundamental motivation that inspired you to do that. Yeah, of course, psychologically you feel bad that the baby pigs are dying, but that's only the result of some more fundamental feeling or moral intuition that you have that's not based in your own self-interest. It's based in something that says little babies dying, whether they're pigs or humans or anything, that's bad. And it doesn't matter whether or not I feel better about saving them. The reason why I initially feel bad about that is because there's something inherently wrong with it. And we all kind of feel that way when we see the videos of starving children and other things of that nature. We know that that's bad. And that's why we either turn the channel, or we give our money, or we make up reasons in our head that justify our not providing resources. But it's not that we're just doing it to make ourselves feel better. There could be something more fundamental that inspires those psychological motivations in the first place, which would mean that not everything is self-interested, but that everything emerges out of whatever that more fundamental thing is. So as you complete this discussion, remember, don't just respond to two students. Don't do the minimum. Push yourself. Keep the conversation going. Respond to your instructor. Respond to each other. Teach each other. Be critical of each other, but always with the overall goal of enhancement, learning, improvement, and a communal movement toward more knowledge.